Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my review of the Fujifilm Instax Wide Evo, a digital camera with a built-in printer that's designed for the largest Instax wide format. Announced in January 2025 and costing around $350 or £320, it's the second wide camera in the current lineup, and I got both of them behind me. But while the earlier Wide 400 is a fully analog camera, the Wide Evo is a digital hybrid that's essentially a larger version of the Mini Evo that was launched 3 years earlier. Like that model, you compose, apply effects and review images using a large screen on the back, with the option to then make physical copies of only the images you like using the built-in instant printer. Instax wide cartridges contain 10 prints each and are typically sold in twin packs for around $19 or £17, so that works out about 95 cents or about 85 pence per print. Your digital photos are stored in internal memory or on a micro SD card, and unlike the fully analog Instax cameras, it's up to you which, if any, images you subsequently print, and also when you do it, so there's no wastage and no surprises. The Wide Evo can also be used as a wireless printer, letting you make instant prints of any image on your smartphone. It does this via Bluetooth using the Wide Evo app, and that's available for iOS and Android phones or tablets, and that can also act as remote control for the camera. Now, the literal big difference between the Mini Evo and the Wide Evo is of course their print format, with the older model making credit card sized mini prints, while the newer model uses the largest Instax wide format that's double the width. But while the Wide Evo shares much the same selection of effects as the Mini Evo, it allows you to tweak them further, as well as applying additional formatting. Meanwhile, the new lens captures a much wider field of view than previous models, and Fujifilm's also had some fun with a new crank lever to activate the printer. So let's take a look around the camera and see what it can do. In terms of design, the Wide Evo is considerably smaller than the Wide 400, since it doesn't need to accommodate the substantial lens housing of a fully analog camera that's designed for this large format. In fact, measuring 139 by 125 by 35mm for the main body, it's almost exactly the same size as the Instax Link Wide printer. Unsurprising, since you can essentially think of the Evo as a printer with a lens and sensor on the front and a screen on the back. In fact, as far as I know, the actual printer specifications of the Link Wide printer and the Wide Evo camera are identical. I really like the styling of the Wide Evo, resembling a large format plate camera and only available in a serious looking black and grey finish. It may be mostly plastic in construction, but it looks and feels good in your hands. Oh, and it weighs 490 grams, excluding a film cartridge. The front is dominated by the lens in the middle, surrounded by a ring to make fine adjustments to the effects. Meanwhile, the usual Instax selfie mirror is to the upper right, and beyond this is a flash which you can force on or off or just set to auto. To the upper left is a push lever for the shutter release, which feels a bit unusual at first, but before long you'll master the pressure that's required between a half and a full press. Meanwhile, to the lower right is a switch that applies a digital crop to the view, effectively acting as a digital zoom. Round the back is a large but fairly coarse 3.5-inch 460k dot colour screen, which is the only means of composition. There's no viewfinder here, and it's flanked by dials on either side to adjust the effects. Meanwhile, running below are a series of buttons and a joystick for navigation. You'll also notice a button above the screen on the rear which opens the camera to load a cartridge. Now, it is possible to use the camera without film loaded or with an empty cartridge, but obviously you're not going to be making any prints. On the left side, as you use the camera, are the power dial, one of the effects dials, and a flap behind which you'll find a micro SD slot for optional storage, and a USB-C port, and that is only for charging the internal battery. Fujifilm quotes around 100 prints per charge, but in mixed use I managed more of about 60 digital snaps and a handful of prints before the battery indicator turned red. On the opposite side are the second effects dial and a neat crank control to activate the printer, more about which in a moment because it is a highlight of this camera. Meanwhile, on the top is the long slot through which the prints will emerge and a large button which cycles through some additional formatting options. And finally, underneath the body is a tripod thread, unfortunately uncomfortably forced to one side by the internal printing mechanism, but hey, at least there is one. With the camera powered up, the design naturally lends itself to two-handed operation, with your thumbs falling comfortably onto the two control dials. From the left dial, you can cycle through the 10 lens effects: normal, light leak, light prism, vignette, soft glow, double exposure, color shift, monochrome blur, color gradient, and beam flare. Then with the right dial you have the 10 film effects: normal, vivid, warm, sky blue, light green, magenta, sepia, monochrome, amber and summer. Now it's possible to stack effects from both banks, making 100 potential combinations, as well as being able to fine-tune their degree using the ring control around the lens. Now there is a bit of a pause between each effect as you turn these dials, which can make it feel a tad sluggish at times, but if you slow down it feels fine. Meanwhile, the large button alongside the print slot at the top lets you cycle between 5 additional formatting options. There's a widescreen crop, an alternative vignette of sorts, and the chance to overlay some nostalgic graphics, including a time and date stamp in the corner, or 2 different film strips. Do beware though, as all effects are permanently baked into your JPEG images, so you may want to record several different versions of a scene to at least give you some options. Oh, and also notice the number of prints remaining indicated in the lower left corner of the screen. 10 here, as I've just loaded a fresh cartridge. Exposures are fully automatic, but push the menu button and you're able to apply exposure compensation to deliberately make them brighter or darker, as well as being able to force the flash on or off, or again set to auto. You'll also find a 2 or 10-second self-timer, the chance to manually set the white balance or just leave that at auto, and also set a macro mode which allows the lens to focus on subjects a little bit closer than normal. Within the further settings section, you'll find the option to turn face detection on or off. The Wide Evo can actually detect multiple faces, and while you can't manually select the desired one, it should automatically prioritize the one that's closest. As mentioned earlier, the Wide Evo sports the widest lens in the instax series to date, equivalent to an ultra-wide 16mm in 35mm or full-frame terms. That's ideal for capturing big views or simply when you can't step back any further, but with a flick of the switch on the front you can set the camera to a narrower field of view, roughly equivalent to 28mm, which coincidentally matches the Mini Evo, and that's great for portraits or smaller groups. Now this change in coverage is achieved with a simple crop of the sensor, essentially a 1.8 times digital zoom. This may reduce the total number of pixels, at least when recording to a micro SD card, but there's still more than enough remaining for making an instax wide print. During playback, you can use the joystick to cycle through images, but note it doesn't have a push action, so in order to confirm any setting, you're going to need to press the OK button instead. Not that you'll need either to activate the printer mechanism though. Once you've found a photo that you like to print in playback, open out that crank lever on the side and wind it around enthusiastically a couple of times until the screen graphics show the image being pushed upwards. This animation then mostly lines up with the actual physical print emerging from the top. The crank lever is undoubtedly a novelty, but an undeniably fun one which brought a smile to the face of anyone that I showed it to. It mimics the film rewind levers on 35mm film cameras, so ticks an important nostalgia box, but it's just fun to spin it around when you want to print, and I love that the designers actually force you to do it a couple of times just to make sure. Now the earlier Mini Evo also featured a fun physical means to activate the printer, but a different mechanism resembling a film advance lever. It's fun, but not in the same league as this one. Finally, at the heart of the Wide Evo is a 3rd-inch type sensor with 16 megapixels, making it larger and more detailed than the 5 megapixel sensor in the Mini Evo. But like that model, there's various gotchas and caveats when it comes to accessing your digital images. For starters, if you're using the internal memory alone, all images are actually recorded in 5 megapixel resolution. The wide mode may start with the full 16, but resizes them to 5. While the zoom mode simply takes a 5 megapixel crop and records that instead. So regardless of your lens setting, if you're using the internal memory, you're only going to be recording 5 megapixels. But don't worry, as 5 megapixels is actually still more detailed than an instax wide printer needs, and it also means that you're maximizing that limited storage. With images at about 1 megabyte each, you should be able to squeeze about 45 of them into the internal memory. Now, if you want to access these images digitally, there's 2 options. You can either insert a micro SD card and use the menus to copy them across, again in their 5 megapixel size, or use the phone app to download them, but this in turn has additional restrictions. First, like the Mini Evo before it, the Wide Evo app will only let you download images that you've already printed using the camera, which just seems mean to me. And even then, they're shrunk down even further to about 1 megapixel, and that includes a border graphic that mimics a physical print. Now, admittedly, they're still fine for sharing or posting online, but you're not going to be doing much else with them. So to avoid all of these gotchas, just insert a micro SD card from day one and record on it instead. First, when you're shooting in the wide angle mode, you're going to be getting the full 16 megapixel images. And secondly, you're going to also have easy access to the files by just ejecting and reading the card. That said, don't expect to unlock amazing image quality, as even the full 16 megapixel images from the Wide Evo will be beaten by any modern phone. Even in this bright daylight photo, you'll see substantial noise, not dissimilar to a vintage digital camera, and sadly not in a good way either. Which is a very long and convoluted way of saying don't think of the Wide Evo as a camera for capturing high quality digital images, because it doesn't. Instead, the sensor, storage, and the way you access those pictures are all geared towards either printing the photos on Instax wide film or simply sharing them online on a social platform, and for that, it all works just fine. But the app isn't just about accessing the images. You can also use it to remote control the camera with a live preview on your phone or tablet screen, which is very handy for composing and triggering more distant selfies or group shots. The app also lets you use the Wide Evo as a wireless printer for your phone or tablet, allowing you to print out any image that you happen to have stored on there. Okay, now for my verdict, during which I'm going to show you some photos that I took with the camera, and I'm going to show you both digital and actual prints. The Instax Wide Evo becomes one of the most compelling and enjoyable cameras in Fujifilm's Instant series to date, and finally gives some enthusiast class attention to their largest format. Last year's Wide 400 may have broken Fujifilm's 10-year drought on wide format cameras, but as a very basic model, it disappointed many enthusiasts who wanted more control. Well, the Wide Evo is Fujifilm's answer, and while it still lacks manual exposure control, there's still a great deal to like. Like the Mini Evo before it, it essentially takes a wireless Instax printer and adds a basic digital camera. The screen lets you compose, preview effects, and review images, while the built-in printer can then make physical copies of only the ones that you like the best. Meanwhile, the phone app lets you access images with caveats that I mentioned in the main review. It also lets you remote control the camera or use it as a wireless printer to output any image on your phone or tablet. The camera sports a new and useful ultra-wide lens and some nice looking effects, but don't expect miracles from the core image quality. It may be more than good enough for sharing online or making Instax prints with heavy effects applied, but in terms of sheer quality terms, a modern phone will easily outperform it. What makes the Wide Evo different and more enjoyable than using your phone for photography though, is the design and operation. Looking like a large format plate camera, it ticks all those important style boxes, while a pair of dials on either side let you mix and match 100 combinations of interesting effects. Then when you see an image that you'd like to print in playback, just pop out that crank lever, wind it around a couple of times, and the photo emerges from the body. The crank is undoubtedly the genius part of the whole experience. Styled to look like a film rewind lever on a 35mm camera, it's not actually physically pushing the print out, it's simply there as a nostalgic alternative to a push button, and I'm here for it. When showing the camera to other people, it's this feature that really brings a smile to their faces, and I love that Fujifilm makes you twist it round at least 2 times to send the signal to print. There's no avoiding the fun here. But you are paying for that fun, of course, with the Wide Evo costing about 2.5 times that of the link-wide printer, with identical quality when printing images from your phone or tablet. Plus, the Mini Evo delivers a similar experience at almost half the price. In fact, you could buy a Mini Evo and a link-wide printer for roughly the same price as the Wide Evo. But neither will give you that combined and complete Evo experience with the wide print format, nor of course that cool crank lever. The Wide Evo delivers a unique overall look and fun experience that I personally really enjoyed using. P.S. Comparing the substantial heft of the Wide 400 here against the more portable Wide Evo here also made me realise that perhaps I don't actually want an analogue wide camera with more control or features, as it would be as unwieldy as that 400. Perhaps the Evo is the answer to having a practical Instax wide camera with greater features. So my future request would be to flesh out the Square series instead, with 99 and Evo versions too, please. Which only leaves me to ask what you think of the Wide Evo and which models you'd like to see next in the Instax lineup. As always, if you enjoyed this review, please do give it a like and consider supporting my channel with a follow. Pretty simple, just a couple of clicks. It's really that easy. Thanks for watching. Check out my other Instax reviews here. I've done all of them, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.